Ever find yourself thinking about how something, well, as complex as life could come from something as, I don't know, seemingly simple as atoms and molecules?
Right.
That's where I think the whole world of biophysics comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like we're peeking behind the curtain, right?
Sure.
Using physics to try to understand how biology really works.
It really is fascinating. Just imagine, like, you can study a cell's surface at the nanoscale
Wow.
using something called atomic force microscopy,
Hmm.
or even using computer modeling to understand how proteins fold. It's
Really?
like physics, biology, computer science, all in one.
Okay, hold on. I gotta let that sink in for a sec. We're talking about, like, actually manipulating stuff at the molecular level.
Yeah, pretty much.
But let's take it back a notch. What do these biophysicists actually, do all day?
Mm.
Our friends over at RoleCatcher, that career platform,
Mhm.
they describe them as, and this is a quote, people who use physical principles to unravel the mysteries of life.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty spot-on description, I'd say.
Yeah.
They're basically taking those fundamental laws of physics, like energy transfer, motion, forces, all that good stuff,
Right.
and applying them to, well, biological systems. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to wrap your head around, let's say, how plants use sunlight to create energy.
Photosynthesis, right?
Yeah. A biophysicist might study the nitty-gritty, the mechanics
Mm.
of how that energy conversion actually happens.
And so instead of just like watching it happen, they're going deeper,
Yeah.
trying to figure out the physics behind it all.
Ex-
That's wild. But where does all this cool stuff actually happen?
Well, labs, obviously. But it's not just all microscopes and test tubes these days. Biophysicists are spending a ton of time in front of computer screens, too.
Real?
Oh, yeah. Analyzing data, using programming languages, like Python even,
Oh.
to model these biological systems.
It's like the classic image of the scientist, alone in the lab. It's changing right in front of us.
Yeah, it's evolving, for sure.
And speaking of evolving, the guide mentions something about field work too, right?
That's right. It really depends on what they're studying.
Okay.
Could be the effects of pollution on ecosystems, or even tracking how animals migrate using, biophysics techniques.
Wow, that's so cool. So many possibilities. But with all that intricate work, what kind of skills do you actually need to thrive in the world of biophysics?
Honestly, the thing that stuck with me from that RoleCatcher guide was how much they emphasized interdisciplinary skills.
Interdisciplinary.
Yeah, so obviously you need that physics foundation,
Right.
but a deep understanding of biology is really important too.
Makes sense.
And with all the tech involved these days, being comfortable with programming and data analysis is, well, it's just as important as knowing your way around a lab.
So it's not just about being like a science genius, it's
Mhm.
about being adaptable,
Right.
right? A quick learner, being able to combine stuff from different areas.
Exactly. They also talked about communication skills,
Mhm.
being able to explain your research, whether it's writing it up or giving a presentation.
Yeah.
Super crucial, especially when you're working with other scientists.
It's like they need to be fluent in like science and collaboration, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the actual lab skills. Being detail-oriented, following those safety protocols, and of course, having the patience for those long, sometimes kind of tedious research hours.
I can only imagine the focus it takes to spend hours, even days sometimes, on experiments and analyzing all that data.
Oh, for sure.
So for anyone out there who's thinking, hey, this biophysics thing sounds kind of awesome, what's the actual path to becoming one of these like scientific explorers look like?
Well, it's like anything in science, right?
Yeah.
It all starts with a really solid education.
Okay, so give it to me straight. What are we talking here? Jumping straight into a PhD program? Or is there like a less intense starting point?
That guide we were talking about.
Yeah.
They were pretty clear about one thing. A PhD is usually, the key,
Yeah.
especially for those who want to like lead research or maybe even work in academia. Right.
Right.
It's kind of like that doctorate tells everyone, hey, this person's ready.
Huh.
They can handle the tough stuff.
That makes sense. But what about those first steps? Imagine someone that just finished high school and they're like, physics is cool and living things are a mystery. Where do they even start?
That's the cool thing about this field, honestly.
Yeah.
You don't just jump into a PhD. Most people start with a bachelor's degree in something related.
Okay, so like the usual suspects, biology, physics, chemistry, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Got to build those core skills first. And what's interesting is the backgrounds can be so different.
Really?
You get people who are more into the physics side of things,
Yeah.
and then others, they're coming from a biology background, or even computer science, believe it or not.
Wow.
It shows you how interdisciplinary it really is.
Yeah, it's like they're putting together a puzzle, taking bits from different places to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And once they've got that solid base, then they can really start focusing.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
go for a master's in biophysics, which can open some doors,
Hmm.
research assistant roles, maybe some industry positions, things like that.
So there are options for people who are more into like using their knowledge in the real world.
Totally. The guide mentioned that job growth in biophysics is supposed to be faster than average,
Oh, that's great.
which is pretty encouraging, right?
For sure. But with all this talk about careers, I'm kind of curious, what does it actually look like? What do biophysicists really do day to day?
Well, the guide actually laid out like a roadmap,
Okay.
different stages of a biophysics career, starting with, the entry-level biophysicist.
So no pressure there. But seriously, what do they actually do? Are we talking like major discoveries right off the bat?
Not exactly. It's more about, building those core skills,
Right.
getting a feel for research, maybe doing some basic stuff, helping collect data,
Mm.
or even just learning how things work in a lab.
So like an apprenticeship almost.
Exactly.
Learning from the pros, getting comfortable with all the equipment and whatnot.
Yeah. And those tools, we're talking everything from those high-tech microscopes to really complex computer programs.
Makes sense.
Remember, it's all about using the best tech to study life on the smallest scale.
Now, the guy did mention something about, hazards in the lab. It's not all like lasers and cool gadgets, right?
Yeah, for sure. Safety is super important in any lab,
Right.
but especially in biophysics, You're working with stuff that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
So learning those safety protocols, being responsible, that's all part of it.
Like a crash course in science and safety, all in one.
Exactly. But it's not all just rules and being careful, right?
Yeah.
One of the coolest things is getting to be a part of real research projects.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Even if you're not leading the way, you're still contributing,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of what we know.
That's what's so cool about science, that feeling of like discovering something new, something no one else knew before.
Exactly.
And it sounds like biophysics is full of those moments.
Oh, absolutely. Now, as you get more experience, you might become a junior biophysicist. This is where you start taking on a bit more responsibility,
Mm-mm.
a little more independence.
So like less assisting, more doing your own thing.
Exactly.
What's that like day to day?
Well, you're probably designing and running your own experiments,
Cool.
analyzing data, using more, sophisticated methods,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even presenting your findings, writing reports, that sort of thing.
Wow, so it's like leveling up.
Yeah,
You're getting more comfortable with the whole process, really making your own contributions.
absolutely. And as you keep going, you might even find yourself mentoring new biophysicists,
Wow.
guiding them, sharing what you've learned.
It's amazing how quickly things can change in this field. From like learning the ropes to becoming the mentor. It seems like there's always something new, something to discover.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of learning and discovery, let's talk about that next step,
Okay.
the senior biophysicist.
So now we're in the big leagues.
Right.
What makes a senior biophysicist different?
This is where things shift a bit. You go from mostly doing research to leading it.
Okay.
They're the ones getting the money for projects, putting together teams of researchers,
Wow.
basically overseeing everything.
So not just experts in their field, but in managing people too. Seems like a tough job, but rewarding.
Totally. They're often the ones coming up with those brand new experimental techniques,
Oh, really?
pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to ask the big questions.
They're like the trailblazers of biophysics.
Exactly.
Forging ahead, inspiring the next generation of scientists.
Exactly.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, the whole journey. From those first days in the lab, learning the basics, to like actually leading these huge research projects. But for those who actually get to the, I don't know, what do you call it, the top, what's that like?
You're talking about the principal biophysicist role?
Right.
They've got the expertise, I guess. Not just to lead a single project, but to really shape like a whole program's worth of research.
Wow, that's next level stuff. What's a typical day even look like for someone like that? Is it just paperwork all day? Or do they still get to, do the actual discovery part?
Well, they might not be in the lab every day running experiments and everything,
Right.
but their work is still all about those discoveries.
Okay.
They're setting the vision, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
They get the funding, they build those collaborations, all that to make the big discoveries happen.
So you need that scientific mind, but also like you got to be a good planner, a good leader.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Almost like, I don't know, a science entrepreneur or something.
All right. Exactly.
They have to spot those research avenues that are, actually going somewhere promising.
Yeah.
Then they got to explain it, get the money, put together the team that can actually make it a reality.
So it's not just about being smart anymore. It's about leadership, having a vision, and even like being a good salesperson to get those grants.
100%. And don't forget, they're also shaping the entire field, publishing research, speaking at these big conferences, mentoring the next group coming up. Their influence goes way beyond their own labs.
That's amazing to think you could have that much impact just from a career in, well, in biophysics. Anyway, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Everything from like the nitty-gritty of the research to those skills you need and even what your career could look like. Biophysicists, they've got a tough job, but man, there's so much potential there, especially for those who are, really curious and driven.
Yeah, I agree, for sure. It's a field where you can actually make a difference, not just in understanding life, but in making things better, developing new tools and treatments that could help people.
And that actually leads perfectly into our final thought for today. We've been talking about how these biophysicists use physics to, like, decode the biological world. But what if we, I don't know, take an even bigger view? If physics is like the language of the entire universe, and biophysics is letting us understand the language of life itself, could there be a connection we're missing? Could biophysics actually hold the key to those even bigger mysteries? Like, how did life even begin? Or, that big one, is there life out there somewhere else?
Now, that's a question that could keep you up at night.
It definitely has me thinking. Huge thanks to our expert for walking us through all this. It's been amazing. We've only just scratched the surface of this stuff, but hopefully we've sparked some curiosity, maybe even, inspired some future biophysicists out there. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.